when we look at Iran and the way it looks at the world and its perspectives, we've said a lot about President Rouhani, about the way he saw things differently from his predecessor, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, less radically and more pragmatically. I think there is something right in this, which is that Rouhani is definitely a moderate, especially compared to Ahmadinejad. Now, we must also bear in mind that when it comes to defining the foreign policy of Iran, well, Rouhani is the president, he's an important element, but I'm not sure he could come with decisions that would overpass another person who is the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme guide of Iran, who is the one that is definitely defining or setting the red lines for Iran, at least as soon as he considers that something that has been trespassed that isn't good for the interests of Iran. The majority of the Iranians consider that the right of Iran to access to a nuclear program is something that I would say more or less can't be negotiated. And if it is negotiated, it should be negotiated to allow Iran to get it and now to get rid of any achievement on this point. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that Iranians want a military track to the nuclear program. They just want to have nuclear civilian capacities that allow them to rely on more energy. At the same time, what we can see and what we've seen with the Vienna talk and the P5+1 talks with Iran is that we are on a positive track, but we are still on a pessimism when it comes to the way every one of the actors looks at the other, meaning they are negotiating, everyone says we are making concessions, but at the same time it looks like we haven't reached the threshold that allows us to say the agreement is being set on the ground. Iran is an important part of an environment that is composed of both an Asian side and a Middle Eastern side, which is the Arab world plus Turkey and Israel. Obviously, in the last 10 years, since the invasion of Afghanistan, precisely in 2001, I think that a lot has changed when it comes to assessing Iran's role in the environment. In Afghanistan, Iran has definitely grabbed more power than before and is an influent actor when it comes to dealing with some actors in the ground, including the Taliban, who were Iran's worst enemy before. When it comes to the Arab world, we also had a lot of shifts. Iran is more influent in Iraq, Iran remains influent in Lebanon, and Iran has an important role in Syria now. Also, Iran, or the relations with of Iran with the Gulf states have evolved towards more tension, especially with Saudi Arabia. So this is why I think that when we look at these perspectives, one thing is that Iran is more influent than it was before. The other thing is that a lot of Arab countries in particular are very cautious and have a lot of fears when it comes to assessing Iran's role in the region. But let us face the facts. I think that Iran is a country that has managed to have more power, but also it has managed to have better relations with some countries in order for it to get more introduced in the region. And I'm thinking about Turkey, for instance, who has developed also another track of relations with Iran. Iran's foreign policy is still dedicated first and foremost to Washington and the way Washington sees perspectives. I think this hasn't changed. Iran at the end of the day considers that the big boss, let's say, is Washington, and everything negotiated must be negotiated with Washington, though there is a facade that allows us to say that there are other actors. When it comes to the EU, I think that Iran also considers that relations with the EU are important for a series of reasons, but maybe the most important of them are the energy-related things and the way Iran can provide oil to the European countries. But at the same time, we can see that what Europeans and Iranians are focusing on is the nuclear track. There are two other countries that are important for Iran on the international level, which are Russia and China. Between the two, I think that China is important because it is an important importer for Iran's oil, and it's also a trade actor that is important for Iran's commercial perspectives. And then Russia is also important, but I would say much more for the nuclear track and for backing Iran when it comes to negotiating any aspects related to foreign policy. So this is why I think that all in all, it remains Iran that determines who it is interested with dealing with. The official trend of Iran will be we are open to everybody, but at the same time, the two main actors for Iran are much more the US on the one hand and Russia on the other hand.